how do you all interpret the description of this panel?
Good question.
Because it's strangely worded.
What's the name of that?
Yeah.
Something
I
about Harry
didn't
Potter.
actually
Something
read
about-
any of the description, so I don't know.
Nice.
Intellectual properties and games.
Yes, but there's a more thorough description in the program, which is
See Harry Potter all over your games? Curious why there are not many Star Wars? Just how do you get to use an IP? Join us for an interactive discussion.
It's like,
I don't know what that means.
yeah, no.
Why are there so few Star Wars?
Yeah, I wish there was more Star Wars.
Oh, it should be multiple Star Wars plural, like not Star
Why
battles.
aren't there
I
so many
think
Star
I think it's an
Wars?
ironic reference to the fact that there are Star Wars products everywhere.
Yeah.
But I'm only guessing that. But the point is, what would you guys actually like to learn from this
Good question.
experience
Uh,
and talk about? Are we talking about
How
licensing?
how to obtain the IP if it is worth obtaining
Yeah.
the IP.
And are we also potentially interested in, if you have an IP, various levels of protection that could be afforded to you?
Sure.
Okay.
You want to talk about copyright and trademark and that sort of thing?
I mean, for a hot
I
second.
probably know more about that than I know about licensing.
Yeah.
So we may have, this conversation may drift off the rails into other areas of our specialty because
Sure, why not?
I can only shuffle and
No,
guess
you've
for
never
too
done
long.
that.
Wait, can we
Well-
start off like the recording with being like, my God, this isn't the hotel restaurant?
Just start
That-
out however
where's
you
my
want.
That red light's been on for like 4 minutes, dude.
But through the editing magic,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I
it's
can take a
stuff
note.
like that.
I can have it start anytime you guys want.
Right.
If
Oh,
you
no,
want to
no.
make it really official here.
I usually do 3, so you have 3 spikes to line
Yeah,
up.
they're real easy to line up. Yeah, you're right. 3 spikes. I usually
There
do
you go.
6.
Oh, whoa! What? Oh, that's amazing! Wait, do you have a
What-
Sharpie
yeah,
marker?
what movie
Or
is
no,
this?
no,
A
Sharpie.
Sharpie.
I'm sorry, a dry erase. I know the difference. I know the
Permanently
difference.
deface your clapper. Anyway,
Never have it
so-
for anything else.
So I haven't done a whole lot of licensing myself. I've been sort of
Both sides are
related to
related.
some projects that did it, and so yeah, let's talk about that as far as we can. Let's introduce ourselves. I'm James Ernest. I'm a game inventor. I work at the absolute cheapest end of the spectrum, and after selling my cheap-ass games company to Greater Than Games, I'm now working even below that radar at a place called Crab Fragment, which is just me and my games, which I mostly give away for free. The licensed properties that I've worked with in my life include Marvel, what else? Pirates of the Caribbean, indirectly. God, that may be it.
Wasn't there Sailor Moon?
Oh, right, yeah, I've been tangentially associated with Sailor Moon product. I don't know much about how that deal came together. So the answers I can give you about finding IPs licensed them are going to be pretty vague, but at least we can have a conversation.
Yep.
And who are you?
There you go.
I'm going to see if that was helpful. Hang on a second. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Robert LaCosse. Let's see, what have I done? How do I know James? Why am I here? I heard. So, I currently work at Milwaukee Tool in the One Key department. So I work on smart tools. I am a user experience strategist and architect. I build experiences for people by researching people, similar in the way an ethnographer might proceed. I get along well with lawyers and product developers and designers and product marketers. In the game space, I worked for Intel as their subject matter expert in games for enterprise. So I built very large live action experiences to help with, among other things, behavior change, content retention, and other initiatives. And I've been involved with GameStorm for probably 8 years, maybe 10. I don't know. It's been a while.
So how shall we begin? This is an interactive panel.
Oh yes, it's interactive.
Which,
So we interact
which
with-
is a code word for we didn't prepare anything.
Yeah. So Q&A is good. Q&A, whatever your priority topic is, we can address that. And you just let us know what your priority topic is.
Since it's about intellectual properties, you already said that this is not your main point, but how would a game designer go about seeing if they could obtain an IP and if that's worthwhile?
I don't know. No, like a lot of game publishers already have IPs that they are in. So if you want to write a Harry Potter game, I think your first plan is to go to those game publishers who already have that license. IP licenses like a Harry Potter, giant ones like that, are usually cut up into really thin slices, and sometimes some of those slices are just sort of are invented and materialized. And so if a game company has the rights to the Harry Potter RPG, they might not have the rights to the Harry Potter collectible card game. And that's a bad example because I know that those were both in the same place. But like, what I'm saying is each kind of game could be sub-licensed to a different publisher who specializes in that. Most of these big IP holders, like something as big as a Harry Potter, we keep using this example, but like imagine we're talking about smaller ones too. Kind of don't care about the amount of revenue they can make from a tabletop game. So sometimes like they just gave the whole tranche to one company and that company is subdividing it. But anyway, find out who's got that, because it's usually an exclusive license, and that means that if you want to do a game with that IP of a particular type, you're going to have to publish it through that person. We kind of talked about this last time, or yesterday's panel. It's a little dangerous to design a game that you can only sell in one place, because you wind up sort of beholden to that. If they won't buy it from you, you can't take it anywhere else. For example, I and a friend of mine did a game design pitch that was a Wizards University game, but we wrote our own universe for it so that if it didn't find a Harry Potter license or a Patrick Rothfuss license or some other like known quantity, it could still be a thing on its own. Of course, the problem with that is that without a license, it's not going to sell nearly as well, but at the same time, you're likely to be able to collect more of the revenue when it does sell. So, and I would say, if you want to write a Harry Potter game, try to write a game first,
Yeah.
and Harry Potter it second, in case the Harry Potter thing doesn't work out.
Absolutely.
Is there a particular other like
No.
IP that we want to talk about? Because
No.
But,
I will say, not Harry Potter.
you're right, of course. I mean, it's a great example because no one's in this room wants to do it. Yeah.
So Casey sent me with a question.
Oh,
Okay.
wait. I want to further dimensionalize James's answer to the prior question. So Tyler Tinsley, who is not here this year, I've noticed, but he gave a really good explanation a couple years ago about the different approaches to game design through nationality metaphors. German game design is like, we will have a system. It will work. The system will work, the architecture will be good, and then we will put a story over the very functional system. The American style...
By the way, this is why Ryan Knudsen has so much trouble doing licensed games. Because when you feed him a story first, he needs a lot of help.
Well, hey, Andrew.
Hey.
Hey,
Welcome.
join us.
Join the panel.
Sorry, I'm a little late.
So then the American style of game design, as described by Tyler, is start with the story, because that'll have a natural arc, and the natural arc will allow you to essentially pick out how you might interpret the story arc as playable moments or turns in the story as potential influencers on game mechanics and game architecture. So you go from story to system rather than from system to aesthetic level. And then there's the French one. The French one begins with the question of why would you play in the first place? Why? Why? For cigarettes or wine?
Free M&Ms.
I know, right?
We have a new panelist joining us.
Oh yeah.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I've been designing games for, turns out it's been 30 years.
Woo!
As of like a week ago.
Happy
and-
anniversary.
Thank you. And thank you. Officially. Yeah, well, I passed 55, so
No,
there's no turning
don't
back.
I just turned
So-
40.
so-
I can feel the reefer creeping closer.
You got a little time. And in that time I've worked done all kinds of IP stuff. I worked at Cartoon Network as a creative director, which was sort of like the maximum torrent of possible IP that you can do. And I've both been involved in working with existing IP and creating IP and working with other teams and developing that stuff. So happy to talk about all that stuff too.
Well, good, because we're not qualified to
You
be
know.
here. We were just holding the space for you.
Yeah.
And they've said as much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing would be what questions would people want to know, like about getting stuff in, working with stuff. I mean, really, it's really fundamentally, right? It's like, where are you getting it? What are you paying for it? Right? And what do you want to do with it that's going to be unique? Because, you know, obviously people aren't giving their properties away for free. I mean, and then the other end is, can you use that to develop something of yourself and then sell that to other people as well? So there's sort of two sides of the coin. So I don't know what people are more interested in hearing about. You sound like you
So this is why I would recommend going with the German style of game design, so you make a stable architecture and dynamics if you don't pre-own the IP, because then you're insulated. So then you can be like, well, this system could be bloop, a Harry Potter game, or it could be a game about cats,
Right.
or a game about Brussels sprouts.
I thought in the board gaming space, like Rick and Morty was really interesting.
It could
Right.
be a Star Wars.
Yeah, although, I mean, you're up
No,
against...
you never see a Star Wars.
Yeah, why is there so little Star Warses?
Right, it's not, at least, and there's no competition, which is great if you come out with a Star Wars game. I thought Rick and Morty was really interesting. Oh, what was the company?
Tell us more.
The comic book company that started making all the board games and then stopped making all the board games. IDW.
Okay.
Oh.
Right, so they were like, we're gonna get into board games, and then they like got Rick and Morty, and like they hit Rick and Morty really, really hard. Like they had one that was the Pickle Rick game with a giant plastic pickle in the case. Like it's like, are you selling the game or are you selling the model? Well, okay.
I would buy it for
They're selling
bubble.
both.
Right, a lot of people did.
I
Yeah,
mean-
yeah. Yeah, so I mean the other thing is, right, is if you're gonna be a company like IDW, which is already which already had Star Trek, is already doing comic books of all that stuff, then they grabbed Rick and Morty, knowing full well they were going to do like a suite of games around it, right? So to your point about the different game styles, right? It's like the other option is to just, get the property and then just hump it until it stops giving you money, right? So
That's true, and usually that hump window is like a couple years, unless you have a real blockbuster.
well, and you're stuck with the. You're stuck with the success of the property that you're a part of. Like a really interesting, when I was a cartoon, like one of the things I did, this was early 2000s, was Gundam Wing. We did a Gundam Wing game, and I got in trouble because I loved Super Deformed, which is like the chibi version of the characters, and I did it, and they were like, I got a little slap on the wrist. They're like, that's actually a separate license from from the Gundam license, but we're gonna let you do it because you're Cartoon Network. And then I had to come to Jesus moment with the guy because I did one of the first online streaming services. Like it was called Cartoon Network Reactor. It was, we just had, we had Star Blazers and we had like 11,000. We had the whole Frieza saga of Dragon Ball Z. And I went to Bandai and I said, oh man, I really would love to have Gundam on here. And the guy's like, you're new here, let me sit you down and explain how it works. Like when we give Cartoon Network a license to something, we sign and they say, you can use it for thing A and thing B. And they completely ignore it and do whatever they want with it. And because they're Cartoon Network, we can't stop them. So like for instance, Dragon Ball Z, if you guys remember, it started out on Cartoon Network and then it was super successful, and then WB is like, we're gonna put it on. They didn't really have the license to do that, but like they couldn't really stop them from doing it. He's like, if we're not, and he's like, with your thing, we're not going to sell enough DVDs to give you access to something that we know they're going to rip us off and just use wherever they want. So like, and the lesson of that is like, if you're going to use IP, you've got to always have the big fish, little fish relationship, and the big fish is always going to big fish their way around and do whatever the hell you want, whatever the hell they want with it. And then, like, I did a Connect 4 game.
But I think there's a moment to be
Sure.
explicit here.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the law is, it matters whose war chest is bigger for the court battle
Right.
ensuing.
Yeah, I always say to people that, when they tell, but it's in the contract. I'm like, the contract is the rules of the fight.
Yeah.
Like, if you get it, that's the shape of the Coliseum. If you get into if you end up in the arena with these guys, like, don't get into the arena.
Yeah, that's something we can probably swing back to if we get more into copyright and trademark and patent and all of this, we talk about, you know, what it costs to file a patent, but that's nothing compared to what it costs to defend it. So you got to really know you got to be swinging hard to keep that stuff under your own control.
Yeah, like Magic and Hasbro and tapping cards, right?
I can tell you a lot more about that than you think.
Yeah. I mean,
WotC never patented tapping cards.
right, but they threatened to.
Right, they threatened to. So yeah, so let's go down that rat hole.
Yeah.
So there's essentially three categories of intellectual property rights protection that you can get for things that you do own. The reason that you pay other people a license is because they own that intellectual property. You can't make a Star Wars game because someone else owns Star Wars. The first one is copyright, which is just it protects the written words. So when you write a book, for example, copyright protects those words in that order automatically as soon as you make them. You can spend a little more to register that and have a little more protection, which means you can sue people for damages when they rip you off. But if you make a book, you own it, and if someone else makes it, you can take them to court for stealing it from you. And that's those words in that order. But as soon as they change the order of those words, it's something they made. And it's a very difficult line to draw, but it's basically, if they rearrange your words, it's their words now. Do you know that the Trivial Pursuit company got sued by a trivia book that they ripped off like a quarter of their material from this one book, right? And the ruling was that the book could own the book, the order of the words in the book, but not any of the facts in the book, even the ones that they made up as poison pills for anyone who ripped them off.
Oh, wow.
So there's stuff in Trivial Pursuit that's wrong because it was stolen from a source that planted that stuff in the source so that people could be tracked if they ripped it off. And the ruling was still, you can't copyright facts, you can only copyright words. Even if those facts are not true. So it works for maps, I guess, but not for trivia. The second one is trademark, and that's specifically for like a logo or a brand or sometimes even a Pantone color, but it's a protection of a mark of a brand, like
Starbucks logo.
Sure, the Starbucks logo, the mermaid, or just the word Starbucks in a particular color and font, like that's trademark. It's a different thing. You do file for it, it's on record somewhere, and you can sue people for trying to make their product look like yours. But again, it's a fine line because you can't trademark trade dress. And so like if someone makes a product that looks kind of like yours and even is confusing in the marketplace, you're going to have to go to court and figure out whether they're really violating your trademark. The third thing, the reason we started this, is patent. And patent is for processes. It protects how things are done. And it's much more complicated and much harder to get, and it's much more valuable if you can get it. So in 99.5% of cases, tabletop games are not worth the effort of patenting. They're too expensive, and they'll never make that cost back, even the filing costs, much less the cost to defend it. But when Magic the Gathering came out, those boys were making money hand over fist, and they thought, you know, one of the things we probably ought to do is patent this game mechanic. So they filed for the patent. They got a patent grant that basically said, you know, here are the rules to the game. They now say patent on the top. Enjoy. And essentially, Wizards lawyers decided, okay, good, now no one can take any aspect of this game and put it in their own game without paying us money. And they told all the other game publishers who were making trading card games, you're going to have to pay us a license to make a trading card game, and if you don't pay us a license, we will take you to court. And for many of those publishers, it was easier to pay the fee and sign on the dotted line and say, yes, I owe you money now, than to challenge this patent in court. Which is great news for Wizards, because now they have a contract where the patent's no longer even relevant. Now I have a contract that says you'll pay me money because you're making a trading card game. I win. Companies that were very, very big eventually didn't do that and wound up winning, you know, the game because the patent was unenforceable. Companies that were very, very small also didn't bother paying them because why would I pay them to make a trading card game? The way that sort of became popularized was that Wizards had patented tapping, which isn't remotely true. Wizards never claimed that they patented tapping, but of course all their detractors were like, I can turn a card sideways if I want to, and you can't tell me not to. Well, of course not, but that's kind of what...
And called it something different.
Well, renaming it isn't...
Right, but that's what people were saying, right? And
turning a card sideways to show that it's been used goes back to Mealborn at least, and Mealborn was ripped off from an older game. I mean, like, they're all stolen mechanics, right? So if you had the money to take that to court and say, look, here's prior art, you can't patent this, you could win that case. Can you afford to do that? As a small game company, no. As a medium-sized game company, not really worth it. As a huge game company, yes. And so eventually that patent became air.
Right, and the common thing was like, I mean, the common thing that I was hearing always was that, even if they didn't own it, they would sue, they can sue you into oblivion, and they don't, just keeping everybody from not doing it pushes people in their way, and they get to sign some contracts and make some money.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the thing, right? It's all a threat to some degree, right? It's just who's good, better, there's nobody better at acting on that threat than the big Hollywood companies, right? They've got reams of lawyers. Another thing from cartoon was like kryptonite locks, right? Kryptonite locks and DC were in an endless lawsuit over that for years.
The
and
name
years.
kryptonite?
The name word kryptonite.
Sure.
They could use it, and it was just détente. It was Cold War that they had been fighting at that time for 20 years, and God knows how much, and going back and forth. And it's funny, like DC Comics, people say, well, they're doing really badly now. Only Batman sells. But like my boss sat me down and said, like, DC Comics exists primarily as a lower hanging fruit to soak up lawsuits, so that if we get sued, we only have to take the value of the comics as the possible value. And I mean, that's changed now because the movies have been so popular for so long. But basically the idea was like, you can't sue them for Batman movie money, you can only sue them for Batman comic book money.
Huh.
And so they existed as a barrier, and it was worth it to keep pouring money into the comics just to have it as a soak.
I'm confused about kryptonite locks, because kryptonite isn't supposed to be notoriously strong. It's a crystal that makes one very strong person extremely weak, but I wouldn't make a lock out of it.
But it sounds cool.
I know, it sounds really good.
And
just
Superman,
don't think about it too
And
much.
Superman's strong, but he's not.
Call him Superman.
that they didn't do.
I know.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that was yeah. I guess that lawsuit just is. I mean, I think I read something about it even like within the last 5 years that the lawsuits, they just.
That's great, and it only persists because, of course, they make enough money from the product that they can continue to fight the battle.
And both sides, the lawyers are happy to keep getting paid to just keep the lawsuit going.
Right, yeah, the lawyers.
America. Legal.
Anyway,
Sense
so
up, legal, very legal, which we always used to joke was the fancy way of saying no, right? Like, we're going to send it to legal. Okay, well, I guess we're moving on.
yeah, you can't ask your lawyer's permission. You really only can ask them forgiveness. Because if you go to legal and say, shall we do this, they're like, that's not a good idea, every time.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a wacky world. I mean, and listen, it's fun to get to play with your favorite toys. Like, I got to make a Batman thing, I got to make a Gundam thing, I got to, to do all that stuff. I mean, the other thing I'll say about the lesson I learned from working with all that stuff is Batman will never love you as much as you love him, right? Like you get to play with the toys, you get to do something with it, but you're not really, depending on the size of it and what you do, you're not really going to leave your mark on it in any significant way, right? You get to play with it, but it's not really going to be yours. I mean, even if you made like a role-playing game out of something, like people remember, Marvel Comics doesn't really care about the history of the Marvel role-playing games or anything like that, right? Or the board games, even if they're a big hit, right? You'll make your money.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, even the Star Wars books aren't really regarded as canon in the movies.
Right. Yeah.
Unless it's convenient, it's completely arbitrary.
So it's fun to be a part of something like that, but and unless you're Jon Favreau or something, you're going to have a really hard time leaving your mark on the overall thing. I mean, I think that's one of the things, like, you'll see like people get a hold of a show and like retcon 50 years of backstory or whatever because like they're I want to leave my mark on something, and it's like really, really hard with these big properties. It's fun to play with them because you love them. But yeah, it's not easy to, that's what you're going to get to do. It's possibly a more profitable way of getting to play with action figures.
So, what other questions?
Wasn't there a question that Casey sent to
Yeah.
bomb us with?
It's Casey. He wants to know if it's worth pursuing rights for Three Amigos and Caddyshack.
That's right. He wants to do a whole set of Chevy Chase based
That's
They
games.
made a Groundhog's Day game.
Huh.
The question is, and I'm facing this with the project I'm working on now. So I'm doing a retro game project for Android, retro emulator, and it's going to be a called Argon if you want to look it up. So we're going to have content, right? It's an emulator. You can bring your own stuff. You can play games on your phone that you bring, or ROMs and whatnot. But we're also going to have a subscription where you get the content, right? We're looking at the big, when can we start to get in the big name games that people really like, and the Centipede and everything that people think about as 80s and 90s hits. And some places are open for business, right? Like Namco has Namco Museum. You may have seen that name on a T-shirt or something.
Oh.
That's just purely a licensing, right? It just exists. They put games they give them to the Namco Museum guys, and then Mr. Do can be on a T-shirt. Mr. Do you can get a hold of that ROM on your system, and they're open for business, and you can walk in. If you want to do Caddyshack and stuff like that, the question is, right? It's one thing to go to a company that's like, doors are open, lawyers are on standby. Please call us up, we're available now, and these licenses are available. And it's another one where like, Caddyshack, huh? Yeah, I'd need a guy, I'd need to call, because wasn't it owned by this guy, right? Like if it's not if they don't know where the rights are, and there's nothing happening with it, they may not care, you're not offering them enough money to care enough to figure out what the real status is. Like, Dune, right? Like, is the perfect example. Like, the biggest thing that happened with the Dune movie, besides the movie, was they cleaned up all the rights to they just been a mess. Nobody knew who had the rights to what, could make more games.
Wow.
Right? And then they were like, well, we're making the movie, so lawyers go do your lawyer thing. Like, figure that out. And now there's Dune games and Dune stuff.
And book, first movie, second movie are all independent IPs, each of which could have licensing to different companies. All that stuff gets chopped up really thin. So, yeah, you could have the rights to the Game of Thrones books to make board games out of, but no access to the TV show, which means you don't have any of the actors in the TV show for your cover art or whatever. There is a licensing show. If you want to find Caddyshack, you need to find who the hell has Caddyshack. But if you just want to see what licenses are available, there's certainly websites and sources, but there's also a trade show that you can go to in Las Vegas. The admission is free, I think, where Harley Davidson and Paramount Pictures and everybody in between has a booth and wants you to come in and pitch them whatever it is you're making to slap their IP on.
Right, if you see, and it's also like waves of it, right? Like, hey, somebody's making a Freddy game. Okay, Freddy they must have it all sorted and like know how to do it. You could probably go make a Freddy board game if there's a Freddy video game, right? Like Nightmare on Elm Street stuff. But like that Rise of the Corleones Godfather game, have you seen that one? Right? It's the same guy who did was it Rising Sun and Blood
Cool Mini or
Rage?
Not?
What?
Cool Mini or Not?
Yeah, but the same designer. Anyway,
Yeah.
all they have the rights to with that is the word Godfather and one picture of the Godfather. And everything else, so every card back has that same painting on it. The cover has the painting on it. They have like one, and I don't know, like going into God to get that license, they'd be like, well, what we've got for you is for this price, you can just have the Godfather and the word the Godfather.
Wow.
Wow.
They have to make up new family names, make
Whoa.
up new locations, everything else. It's a Godfather game. I mean, it's got Godfather on it, but just one piece of
Just
art.
one
Yep.
piece
Yep.
of The Godfather.
Yep. And it's a painting they did based on an image from the film. So.
I think there's an underlying current of decision making that merits mentioning here. So everything is possible. In software, everything is possible. It's just how much time do you want to spend on it? And time costs money. And this is where I mentioned, there's this thing called the project management triangle, where it's a triangle, and you get to pick 2 of 3 things: time, money, and quality. So in the case of the Godfather game, they decided, well, a little bit of quality. We could reduce the level of quality, and that in turn allowed them to reduce the cost associated with it, probably producing at the same time. So in exchange for compromising on quality, taking one Godfather image and the word The Godfather, they were able to meet their budgetary requirements. So that decision matrix is germane to the IP decision-making process.
Yeah, fast, cheap, good, I call it.
Yeah.
It's the triangle. Yeah, I mean, Who knows though, right? Who knows how much that Godfather, I mean, that may have cost them way, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, well, okay, I guess we're doing it, right?
Well, it's like, and in that context, the cost is best expressed, you know, cheap, because that is not it's not a static thing, it's a contextualized thing. It can either be cheap, cheaper, really cheap, or it can be modestly priced, more expensive.
None of those
most
is a relevant
expensive.
measure. The question is whether it's
Yeah.
worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you make the money back out of paying whatever you're paying for that license?
And when people, like on every project I've been on where they try to have all three, it's fast that goes out the window first, right? Because they're like, oh no, come on, just, you know, okay, well, we're gonna give you a little more budget. Okay, but I need more to really get it done. Well, no, we'll just give you this much. Okay, and then 6 months later, it's like, well, I'm not done yet. Well, we've sunk this much money in. Okay, here's a little, you know, it's like the thing about that triangle is it will force you. You can accept it and make decisions in advance, or you can reject it and discover that you were bound by it later, right? Like you can be like, okay, let's go fast and cheap, and it'll suck and it'll be fun, and
Correct. You
right?
can do that.
You know, and
I have personal experience.
yeah, and you know, just get it out the door, right? And whatever it's going to be, but or you can deny it, and then one of those three things will slowly work its especially fast will go out, you know, fast goes out the window just because you're still working on it. So yeah, but yeah, project management's a whole nother thing. You can try.
You can try.
We all try, you know, a little.
Yeah. So I mean, is there any other right? So yeah, I think it'd be funny to see what. I mean, I could see a Caddyshack game being okay, I guess.
I mean, if it involves the gopher,
Well, I was gonna say,
I'm
you've
curious.
got to be on the field.
You're looking at it from the perspective of whether the license is worth paying for, not whether the game itself could be good, because the game could be great.
Right.
Yeah.
But honestly, in the case of licensed products, it is the license, not the game, that brings the money in.
So you just
Right.
reskin this game slightly to be a
Golfy Shack.
semi-indentured country club servant game,
Right. I mean, even if
and their housing.
and then really what you're paying for is a form of marketing, right? I mean, that's what you're saying, right? And can you let people enough people? Are there enough people out there that if you could reach them, will actually buy the game, that it's worth it to get the license?
Yeah.
Right. Some stuff is clear. Star Wars, although you know, again, Star Wars, the market is flooded, right? So
What? There are no Star Wars games.
According to
out.
the panel description, there are just no Star Wars.
Fascinating.
I did
I'm going to lead a rebellion.
I did an
Oh.
I did an unpaid license project at the early days of cheap ass games called Before I Kill You, Mr. Bond, and 7 years later, MGM finally tracked me down and was like, "Look, man, you're gonna have to quit doing that." But I mean, whether it had that name on it or not, I was trying to capitalize on the spy movie thing, and that's what all these sort of look-alike products are doing. They're licensing without the licensing. Like, I was talking to you yesterday, I think, about Dr. Sweet's Carnival of Chocolate Horrors,
Yes.
and that's a game I want to make. I actually did a pitch for a licensed Willy Wonka game that didn't sell, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to do an unlicensed one then, because everyone knows this story, and I'll just do it.
Could be a good role-playing module as well.
The outcome of the MGM thing, they sent me a cease and desist. When I first published the product, it was my second product, and I said, you know, let's see what happens. If they ever send me a cease and desist, I'll just cease and desist, right? And so 7 years later they did, and I was like, okay, I will stop, you got me, and what are the terms? They said, you need to stop selling this product in the next 3 months and never, and change the name and never sell it again. And I said, okay, I have to stop selling it, right? And they're like, yeah, okay, good. So I told all the distributors that they had 3 months to buy up this print run that I had just done. And it flew out the door. Okay, I just sold 5,000 copies in 3 months. Anything else? As an afterthought, they were like, yeah, you should probably pay some damages. And I was like, how much? I don't know, less than 1,000. I said, all right, 400 is less than 1,000. They were like, yeah, okay. So I sold 5,000 games in 3 months and paid $400. I think I got a pretty good deal.
Well done.
I mean, it's harder to fly under the radar now than it was, right, because of the internet and stuff like that, and they can just autopilot it their way. I mean, it used to be a lot more Wild
Yeah,
West.
but they got to whack so many moles out there, man.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Cheap Ass definitely flew under the radar. It took, I think, someone who worked there to bring home a copy of it, and for legal to see it and go, oh man, now that I know about this, I have to do something.
Right, and it probably cost them 10
Oh
grand.
God, it cost them their legal fees. Oh my God, it must have hurt like a pig.
I like the re-release of the Bond game too, because the name has changed so mightily.
Well, I first of all, okay, so when we took it out of print, I had a contest to rename the game. And I couldn't use the winner because the new name was What Part of Dr. No Don't You Understand? So for a while we call it James Ernest Totally Renamed Spy Game, but eventually we renamed it as Before I Kill You, Mr. Spy, which is a perfectly good title that I should have used from the beginning. But as I said, it was our second game and we were young and foolish.
And lots of people get plenty of mileage by just skirting as close to the sun as they possibly can get. Like there's no, I have a bunch of designs that I've done talking about words in order that I just call war stars until I'm like,
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Well, there's a product in Target, or there was in the last few years, black and white boxed card game called Crabs Adjust Humidity. It looked exactly like Cards Against
Yep,
Humanity.
I saw that.
And so they're playing for the irony of, haha, we're ripping you off and you can't do anything about it. And for that kind of product and that kind of audience, it's perfect. But I don't know if they're still around.
I mean, they sold a ton and probably
Yeah.
There's like 20 other ones now.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's a genre.
Yeah.
I have a game designer friend who is like making a new deck builder, and I'm like, they're all the same. He's like, yeah, but I'm not ripping anything off now because after there's 10 games in the genre, then it's a genre. It's not a rip-off anymore. It's a good number. Okay, so as soon as there's 10 Cards Against Humanity rip-offs, it's not a rip-off anymore. It's a genre.
Yeah.
And it's not like Apples to Apples didn't come first.
So I just have to rip something off 10 times.
Well, yeah, but
You're
I'm not.
expediting the process.
Let me be clear. I'm not defending Cards Against Humanity on any grounds. I'm
Yeah,
just saying that Crabs Adjust Humidity is clearly ripping them off, not just in terms of mechanics, but also trade dress. Yeah, Apples to Apples predates all of that.
Right. So in terms of the game, in terms of it being a genre, right,
Yeah.
of that kind of party game, they showed up second at least. Yeah. It's an interesting.
But I think we should use that model more often. Okay, it's like Settlers of Catan, but with swear words.
I love
Ship it! It's not, you don't have to change very much. really.
Settlers of North Jersey.
Jersey Shore, man. Come on.
Okay.
No,
Pretty straight.
we're
Well,
talking
North
about
Jersey's
IP.
North Jersey's what I know. So. Yeah. It's. Any other questions about generally about it or?
Yeah, what are we actually supposed to be talking about
Yeah.
on this panel?
Interaction. We demand it.
How long does an IP contract last? Like how long can
What
you
you got?
continue using that for the game, or is
3 to
there
5
an
years.
average?
Yeah, 3 to 5 years is about what I was thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
That seems to be the horizon on a lot of contracts where, multiple people agree to make money together for a while. They kind of want to sunset it in about 3 to 5 years. Usually, it may auto-renew. I have plenty of contracts like that where if no one does anything, it'll just automatically renew for that kind of period, but it also cuts off when anybody wants to cut it off. The contract is just words on a page, right? And so whatever the damn thing says, if both people want to say this is done, they can write a new contract and say that old contract is done. But yeah, 3 to 5 years seems like enough time to make the thing, sell the thing, make most of your money on it, and then reassess where
Plus,
you're at.
if something changes hands or there's a new regime at the whatever company, like they want to know that they can like let things fade and get on with what
Yeah.
they want to do,
Yep.
right? So yeah, that's another reason because no executive lasts forever.
I wasn't sure how the flow would
So
go.
they're like, hey, we're going to bring it all back in house. We're not. I mean, that'll never happen with Star Wars, right? Star Wars is how anything Disney. It's like how fast can we get it slapped on how many things and get how many people to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, look at Jesus, Baby Yoda. Good God Almighty.
Oh, diabolical.
This
Got
works.
to admit, he is a very puntable size.
He is. He's very and adorable, and you could turn him into a robot or whatever. But just like Star Wars, the Disney Star Wars, we got one thing that works. It's going to be everywhere.
Yep.
Like from giant size to pencil erasers to whatever. It's
Yep.
just gonna. The last thing I saw that was as impactful as that was Frozen. Frozen was just
Wow.
It's still everywhere.
Yeah.
So really, the Andrew Mayer Hump It to Death IP window is actually a curve where it goes like as soon as there's a little nibble, it's like rocket ship.
Depending on who's licensing it, how good they are at licensing it, and how many people think they can make money off of it, right?
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
nobody's better at that than Disney.
Right.
You know, and you know, they're just, which is why, you know, I think that like all the Pixar stuff is going off to Disney Plus, because it's like, you know, we're not, you know, they're not seeing dollar signs in the characters that they're creating for those things, because they're a little too realistic and whatnot. So, you know, like what was that, Luca? Like there's no like Luca bicycles, right? Like it's like,
That would have been a really cool idea for them to do.
sure, and somebody would have, but somebody would have to have done that. But how? And then it would have been one. You know, it's not like the same level as like. I mean, maybe they can sell the panda from the new one, but like, you know, like Toy Story was literally like, here's a bunch of toys, and like, we
It
can.
existed in the 90s and then just kind of disappeared.
Right, but at least it
Well, most of the toys in Toy Story were pre-existing. Like you can sell Buzz and Woody, but you can't sell Mr. Potato Head. Somebody already has that.
That's right, but the dinosaur and the wiener dog.
Slinky,
Yeah.
Guide,
Yeah.
even the piggy bank, like,
Yeah, but you notice in the second one, it was like, here comes Zurg, and we've like,
Yeah,
you
sure.
know, we've started like, yeah, they definitely.
Now, the Barbie Lake fishing pole, top quality toy.
Wait, the
from the first one where like Sid had mutilated all the
oh
toys.
yeah, oh the Barbie, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It is-
They didn't really
Wait,
do
you could buy that
anything
as a
with
toy?
that.
You should have brought it.
I think they made action figures, like specifically
Yeah.
of the Misfit toys.
Ooh,
mean,
Yeah, but
there
that,
is-
like, they didn't exist for very
Yeah.
long. Like, that was,
One-
Disney missed a
one
mark.
run.
I mean, there is a flip side to all this too, right? Like I was at the Goodman booth yesterday, and they had a role-playing expansion for Empire of the East, which is a 1960s Fred Soberhagen, now a very obscure author, sci-fi fantasy series that like I only read because I read the sequels and went back and read the early ones, and I picked it up and I was like, who is this for besides me? Like you know, you have you
It's
know,
for the author.
You know, well, but he's dead, and
No, of the supplement.
right.
For the person who created the book because they really like the original
Right,
IP.
and they've got a $30
Yeah.
book out, but
Right.
like it's a gorgeous book, well done. You know, so there is a possibility if you really love something, you can go and scare up, you know, the rights to it and
I
to do
did
something.
entertain ideas of that in the sort of mid-phase of Cheap Ass Games, of going out and finding like old crappy 70s TV shows and turning them into board games, if I could get the license like super cheap.
Right.
But kind of like one by one, they turned into remakes and movies, and I was like, okay, someone else had this idea, and they have more money than I do.
But yeah, like, you know, if you think you can share the love or it's inspiring enough, I mean, it doesn't mean you're sharing your profits, and you could just make your own thing out of it. But I mean, like Goodman's obviously they're you know, you guys they do DCC, right? Dungeon Crawl Classics. Like they started out as a pure OSR stuff and hiring the original artists from the old first edition D&D stuff, and amongst other artists to get that flavor, and now they're reprinting classic D&D modules in these huge tome editions with modern remakes that they're playable in 5th edition, although I don't know how much better they are than the originals, but they're nice things you can put on your shelves and they can do it. So they sort of slowly backed into being an IP related business by just getting into that general space and then licensing stuff. And that's an interest, like to me, that would kind of be the most fun way to do it, right? Is to be in that space, prove that you're in that space, build your audience, and then start feeding your audience things that they know they like because you're in that space and you're also a fan. Like that I think, from a marketing perspective, it's not that crazy expensive. You get to start your business and build your war chest first, and then start to pull in licenses that you know you have a really good chance that you're going to
I
execute
feel
well.
like Looney's doing that. With all the different licenses they're getting for Flux.
For Flux, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have sort of, as a very small publisher, pioneered that micro tranche of licensing and say, yeah, we can do a Back to the Future Flux, we can do a Monty Python Flux. So yeah, I think the model you're describing is what they're doing.
I don't know, after meeting the Loonies, they strike me as the type of people that might not have gotten licenses.
They certainly did. Yeah, they're very professional. I don't know which Looney you're speaking of, but I know Kristen's kind of in charge of that monster, and she's really on it.
Munchkin also, right?
Oh, yeah.
They
Oh, yeah.
You know, they started licensing across other game licenses, right?
Right.
Knights,
Right.
Knights of the Dinner Table.
That's appropriate for Munchkin to actually license game licenses because they know their whole IP is feeding on itself.
Right, and that, you know, if you're successful enough, right, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, become your own license. And you know, hopefully the lawyer that is negotiating your licenses can also negotiate your product as a license, so. You
Well,
know,
if you've got a winning formula, why change?
right,
Yeah.
and let other people do it. I mean, right, like I'm surprised, honestly, that well, I guess the D&D hasn't slapped on more stuff, but they seem to have some. They seem to keep that all in house, right? They don't seem to license out Dungeons and Dragons for other modules and stuff like that.
That is what it would appear as. Though I am curious, do the D&D offshoot products like the cookbook or the drink guide, are those in house as well?
No, but that's
Okay.
not games. Like I'm saying, like for their game stuff, like the board games and stuff like that. Whereas Games Workshop is like, right? They handed all of their role playing stuff off to Fantasy Flight for a decade or more, right? And anything that wasn't miniatures related was all done. It was all licensed for their game stuff. And they did take it back in again recently and went like, oh, you guys are making enough money now. Okay, we'll take it back and we'll do it ourselves. And-
Fantasy Flight got picked up by Asmodee, right?
Yeah.
So you can imagine that
Yeah.
getting split up at that point.
Right, and probably they didn't really want to be in the business of doing other people's licenses anymore either.
Like Asmodee bought
Everybody.
Mayfair and didn't get Catan, right? Because Catan was actually a separate company that was sub-licensing to Mayfair.
Okay.
So that got sort of carved off, and Asmodee got the rest of Mayfair, whatever that is. Everything is weird, man.
Yeah,
Everything.
and then somebody just bought Asmodee in November.
Wait, what?
Yeah, Asmodee sold, which of course is the goal of any big fish like that, is to
Some
get big enough
mega-
to someone else give you money for it, yeah.
And
that
that's-
sell-off was shortly after they had carved out their
The RPG
North
section, they
Americans.
did a bunch of stuff, like,
piece of Asmodee.
yeah.
I mean, that whole thing is, I mean, that's the other thing that's happening, right, is consolidation of all this licensing stuff, right? Whoever bought Asmodee is this gigantic, they've been buying everybody, right?
Yeah,
This
they
gi-
bought Dark Horse, they bought
Yeah.
some video
Wait,
game
what is
companies.
this called?
It's called the Corporation. They do deep,
I know,
deep
like,
space
right.
mining and
They're not
Indian
that much
exploration.
farther away from that, right? They have some name like the Media Corporation or something. It's just some
Ugh.
super generic name. They just exist to like
Gross.
to
That's
like
to eat smaller fish.
yeah,
Gross.
and just put in them, just try to, you know, because now the money, with the way the since there's no limits on that, right? So that's the other thing, right? It's just getting harder and harder to like.
He's going to have lots of opportunities to sync this audio.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're putting section markers in? Nice.
Asmodee's parent company is Embracer Group.
Embracer Group, that's it.
Embracer Group?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God.
Right, Evil Corp,
Nice.
right?
Evil Corp.
That's
Right,
right. Bear hug.
We love you to death. Yeah, right. The Embracer sounds like a character from a
Batman.
like
The Embracer. Oh, God.
like a '90s horror movie or something, like a Cenobite.
I'm gonna hug you to death. Come here.
40 arms. With 5 claws.
Previously, they were known as Nordic Games Licensing AB and THQ Nordic AB.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
teach. Oh,
So they must have gotten an infusion in cash.
I know.
Like they must have gotten an infusion in cash and said just go out and buy everything and
Yeah.
we'll be set. Yeah. Huh. So yeah, that's the other thing, right? I mean, when you stare into the abyss stares into you. So when you go out to make these licensing deals, you are getting on the radar of the companies, right? I mean, if you had wanted to make a James Bond game while you had an unlicensed James Bond game, that would have been a bad idea, right? So right, and that's something to keep in mind, right? You gotta come correct because they're gonna shake you down and make sure that because they
Well, and I'll tell you that I did have a lawyer at that moment for some reason that was not related to the Bond game, but I said, could we fight this and win it? We're just a parody. And he's like, yeah, you can fight this and you can win it. How much is this game ever going to make? You can't afford it. Yeah, so. Money seems like really important stuff. The more I hear about it, the more I wonder why everyone doesn't have it.
right. For a conceptual game that we've only for a conceptual game that we've only been playing for a millennia or so, it certainly has a lot of impact on our life.
Questions?
yeah. Comments?
Of any type.
Feelings?
Don't feel like you need to be restricted to what we don't know about.
Like, James, what did you have for breakfast? Or
you know, life. If you want life
Andrew.
advice, sure, we can.
Oh yeah, life advice. From
yeah, oh God.
Oh yeah, this seems like the real place we would want to go to for that.
Robert, how's your kid?
Oh, my kid is doing wonderful. He very much enjoys calling out the historical inaccuracies of his bin of dinosaurs and how they are sold, and how obviously that's a Jurassic dinosaur, and obviously that's a Cretaceous period piece, and why would they ever be together? These plebs that publish this thing. How ridiculous.
Now, are dinosaurs still in copyright, or can anyone do that?
I mean, dinosaurs are pretty far out of
The
copyright.
movie Disney's Dinosaur?
Oh no, just regular old
Or-
dinosaurs.
They must, I mean...
Hey, isn't it your wife's birthday today too?
Oh yes,
Oh, it is?
yes, oh yes, that is a thing. My wife's birthday. Hi, Robin, if you're watching this. But yeah, it was technically yesterday, and I did spend some time with my wife yesterday, and I'm going to spend some time with my wife.
Technically, in that it was yesterday.
Yes, it was definitely yesterday,
Okay.
and there's definitely a party today. And I am definitely going to be at a fraction of that party.
I believe the fraction was described earlier as a hot minute.
Yes, maybe. I see there is a tit for tat going on about that contact information.
Should not set in the middle.
But yes, no, I love my wife a lot, and her patience is quite impressive. I survive based on that patience. Sometimes thrive, yes. Other questions, feelings, thoughts, trepidations?
James,
Yeah.
if you had the chance to go back and make the decision again, would you still sell cheap ass?
Would I sell the company? Yeah, I kind of had to. I and those among my immediate circle of employees did not want to work there anymore, essentially. Like, we started about 4 years prior with a 5-year plan to bundle it up and sell it. So yes, I did and I would, because I don't want to run that show
Are you happy
anymore.
where it is now?
Not exactly. But that's a risk. That's a risk you take, right? So yes, I'm glad that I'm not running that big monster anymore. I really was never very good at it, and but
I
yes.
remember you seeming happy at the time that you were selling it. So.
Well,
excited in it.
I was excited at the potential for the future,
There you go. And here we are.
and here we are in the future.
The glorious future.
with a twist that nobody saw coming. 2 years ago.
Several. Every horseman of the apocalypse
Yes.
is on the horizon right now.
Right.
So yeah, no one saw that coming, except maybe I mean whoever wrote about the horsemen was spot on.
But you don't have to manage a games company during the apocalypse.
No, that's true. I am certainly glad I didn't have
Silver linings.
to run cheap ass games through COVID, because I don't know how we would have done anything. But and of course that difficulty applies to the new owners too. But yeah, I'm struggling with them right now to see what's going to happen next, because they've taken the website down, and so even the free stuff that we used to give away is currently offline. I think that is supposed to come back, but this is a dark time. Literally a time when it's dark.
So do you still have a relationship? I mean, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, technically it's all under license. Technically I can get it all back.
Oh, okay.
But what am I going to do with it? So yeah, it was not an outright sale. It was
Okay.
a big licensing chunk. Here's every game in the catalog. See what you want to do with it.
See how IP works for folks?
Yeah.
Could you talk about licensing? I mean, I don't know if I missed it.
Sure. What specifically?
What type, percentages or?
What does a license cost?
Great question.
Whatever you
Does it
get.
depend on the license?
Right. It depends so much.
Depends on how many children
There-
you have and which
And
one's
what
the
do you-
least
and what do you-
favorite.
what are you getting?
A high value license is going to hit you with not only a percentage but also a guarantee. They're going to want some upfront price that is theirs no matter what you do with it. And so that means that if you're going to pay for it, you need a business plan that's going to recoup that cost. And so, I don't know, if you wanted to license the Dukes of Hazzard to make a board game, how much would you expect to pay for it?
given that it's just gone through a movie remake.
Right.
Oh.
But you're not licensing the movie, just the TV show.
Right. Okay, just the TV, just the old timey TV show.
So what are you saying? Like, what do you think what the upfront would be on?
Yeah, what are the numbers in that contract? Like, I mean, obviously we don't know for sure, but
Right.
it's
I would say like 40-50 grand, something. Like
40,000-50,000 as an advance or a guarantee,
Yeah, I would say so.
and then something probably along the lines of 5 to 10% of gross. Yeah, that either cuts into that advance or is on top of it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
with a board game, you got to ask yourself, am I ever going to make that money at all? And is the license I'm paying for worth it? They're probably overcharging, right? Because you go to the licensing shows and they're expecting you to make apparel or things that make money, and they don't really understand that board games make almost nothing. It's hard to carve that licensing fee out of what you're making unless you've got some kind of trick.
I think there's a key detail to the service here. So James, what licensing shows?
We just talked about it.
Like the show that you go. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you go to the licensing shows. Sorry, I misinterpreted that as like there's like a convention for licensing.
There is.
Oh,
Yeah,
what?
the
In
licensing
Vegas.
show in Vegas. It's
Okay.
Vegas.
I took
And I
notes.
think
Licensing
admission is
show.
free. She wrote it down. You were right here, and you didn't know it.
There's no notes on here.
There are surely more than one, but I've been to the one in Vegas, and like I said, it's booth after booth of organizations just like, we have all these 70s TV shows, or We Are Harley Davidson, who doubtless don't know how little you can give them. They think their license is worth a lot more than it is.
And back to the Harley Davidson, are the licensing shows themed? So, like, would you go to, say, the TV show licensing convention?
No,
or
I think these are
or is it
IPs
just
looking to get slapped on a product.
Have you seen Licorice Pizza yet?
What?
The movie Licorice Pizza.
No.
It's the new Thomas Anderson movie. But
Okay.
anyway, there's a scene that's literally takes place in a '70s licensing show, with like the actual, supposedly Fred Gwynn standing there, and it's all stuff that teenagers like, right? So it's in a room, and it's like all stuff that you can get involved in and sell a license. So it's kind of funny to see it done through the lens of like early '70s. So that stuff's been around for a while.
Got it.
Yeah. But
And there's more than one of these.
I mean,
And they happen in Vegas.
Yeah, I had the Harley Davidson guy. I talked to him. I was like, I think I want to make a game with your brand on it. And he was like, what are your annual sales? I'm like, well, I don't have the game yet, so 0. He's like, get the hell out of my booth. I'm not talking to you unless you, I think he said like 20,000 annual sales or something like that of his product. I'm like, well, okay. I will never sell that many of your product, but thanks for your time and attention, and
Right. I mean, the question is like how do they make the deal? So the key, like if you think about it in terms of like making a deal for a keychain, right?
Yeah.
On a Harley Davidson keychain. Whoever makes that's got to be really heavily into the keychain business, doing enough product that they know that they can sell that much of it.
Yeah.
Right. And they're going to do 4 or 5 or 10 Harley Davidson keychains, right? Something like that, right? So. Because there's a lot of junk out there with stuff on it. So those companies, right? So those companies have to be in the making junk business.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like seriously.
Yeah.
Right?
Is it common for IPs to not like licensing their IP out if they know you're also working with another IP that's similar, like they don't want them paired up?
I would strongly
Think
doubt
like
that.
DC versus Marvel versus Image versus Dark Horse.
Very rarely, unless they really have some reason to hate each other,
Right.
or they're in a lawsuit with each other, and you doing that is going to make it worse, right?
Inadvertently.
Right, or advertently, right, like through their eyes, right? Like if you did this with that, then that proves that our thing is like the other thing, and we're suing them over the fact that it's not.
Ooh,
Right?
spicy.
Yeah. You see that kind of stuff happen, right? It's like, yeah, we're not them. We're so much better, right? But yeah, otherwise, especially these days, it's all rolling down. Like it's so impersonal anyway. Like what does Disney care? Like who's their competition really? At
Yeah,
this
no one
point?
messes with the House of Mouse.
Right? Like
They eat their competition.
right? They'll just buy you.
Oh, that's okay.
All right.
So like 99% of the time it's just, they see dollar signs. Give me money.
Yeah, they're set up to sell that. They don't want to put any impediments on that because that's profits for them, and they need to show that growth anyway. I'm always interested, like, like how Netflix's stuff works, right? Like Stranger Things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you have, is like when you make a deal with Netflix, are you making a deal for them to be your, to be running all that stuff for you? Or is it like they're different deals? Does Stranger Things do their own stuff? Like, does Netflix have to license it back to do the games that they do out of it? Like, I'm very curious about, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm curious, even with like the game IP properties, but there's lots of situations where two intellectual properties get merged into a product. And the money could be flowing either way. Like, who pays who for what? Yeah, I'm putting my name on your thing. I could think of that as advertising for my brand, and so you should be paying me. Or I could think about it as my brand gives your brand more value, so I should be paying you. I mean, like, it's often weird. Just whoever makes up the deal is the one who decides which way the money flows.
Who's the author who just had Bill Clinton supposedly write a book with him? So his whole thing is he writes spy thrill. He writes political thrillers. What's his name? It's not Tom Clancy, but it's another guy like that. And he wrote a bunch of books. He got real famous, but like a lot of these guys who did it, he was a marketing guy first. So now what he does is he puts his name and somebody else's name on his book, like Bill Clinton and him, and then get somebody else to write that book in the flavor of what he does.
Whoa.
And that's his whole business.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so he's been doing that, and like, and that's really where the book industry is at now. It's just like brand, ever since V.C. Andrews did Flowers in the Attic or whatever, and then died and had somebody else write the book in their name. Like, that's how so the publishing industry is. If you want to see what the low-level churn stuff looks like and what opportunities are in there, the book publishing industry is really interesting because they're making deals, not that far above a level above what board games and gaming can do, and using the same tools, right, print and publishing. So that's a good place to go look if you want to see what opportunities are and what kind of crazy stuff is happening, right? But yeah, what was the Bill Clinton book name? I can't remember because I listened when I was doing indie publishing stuff, book publishing stuff. A lot of guys, like one guy got to get his name on the book with the big guy, and he's like, it doesn't matter. Like it didn't move my book, the needle on my books at all. It's big name and me. And he thought it was going to be a great marketing opportunity, and he said his sales barely went up.
Yeah.
So, that's the other thing with these multiple deals is like, sometimes they're, even though you think you're the little fish, they're still getting more out of you than you're getting out of them.
James Patterson?
Patterson, yeah, that's it. So he's been doing that for a decade. Where, he started off with a lot of indie, like, so when the indie revolution came along where everybody was self-publishing, they just were like, okay, come write a book with us. And so they were able to actually build their audience off the indie publishing stuff. Like yeah, it's, you got to watch your six on all this stuff for sure.
Well, we have come to the end of our hour.
Woo, we made it!
Any final questions before we let you go? Thanks so much for coming.
Indeed.
We hope we've been somewhat useful in your pursuit of licensing.
I'm always
In
excited.
your pursuit of pain and
Yeah,
misery.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Well,
is
that's
a
what
lot of
they
that.
said when I said I wanted to design a board game.
Yeah.
They said don't.
Right. That's the thing, right? Like everything you do is going to be a path of struggle to get to it. So
Avoid all paths.
have a passion and see what and see what happens, and only put up the money you're prepared to lose is the lesson.
And there are seminars about board game design later today. Hope to see you there.